Hello everyone, we said we were going to show another game from round 8 of the 2019 Sinquefield Cup, so here it is. It's Nepomniachtchi versus Levon Aronian, and it's quite an interesting game. It's a quiet game, but also not, so without further ado, let's just enjoy the game. Jan opens with the white pieces and he plays e4 with e5 by Levon, knight to f3, knight to c6 and bishop to c4. With knight to f6 from Levon, the two knights defense, and now d3. We're not going to be seeing any knight to g5 action today, unfortunately. Bishop to c5, and now comes castles with d6 and c3, preparing to expand on the queen side and also preparing d4. With a6, creating a safe square for the dark square bishop, rook to e1, and now bishop back to a7, tucking the bishop in for later. I always like to mention that knight to g2 doesn't really pose white any problems. You can just play rook e2, and it's not a problem. White can, whenever white play, wants, just push the knight back with h3, and it's not going to be a problem. f5 seems like an active move, but your king is still in the center, you haven't castled, it just seems very risky. So, bishop back to a7 by Levon, and now bishop back to b3. With castles, h3, not allowing bishop g4, rook to e8, and now knight b to d2, with bishop to e6 challenging white's light square bishop. And now there have been some games that have reached this position. Bishop to c2 is a known move here, knight to c4 is a known move, knight to h2 is a known move, knight to f1 is a known move, but the move Nepo plays is a new move in the position, and it is as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. Nepo plays bishop to a4. Now it really is a weird move. Hard to understand what kind of a move is it and what it actually does. As Levon can just play b5 here and push the bishop back, and this is exactly what Levon does. He plays b5, and now we have bishop to c2. So what's the idea behind bishop to a4? I have no idea, as black wants to play b5 at some point. So it seems like white just improved, maybe just gave black a tempo, or it's some really sort of a really sophisticated idea that is beyond my comprehension. So if anyone has an idea on what bishop to a4 is supposed to do, feel free to add in the comment section. But okay, with h6 now, knight to f1, remaneuvering the knight, and now d5, as white now allowed it. You always want to play d5 when you can. With e captures on d5, bishop captures on d5, and now knight to g3. We have knight to h7. The idea is knight to f8 to g6, and from there you will be nicely controlling f4 and h4. With a4. Now this could be one way you could look at it, why white wanted to provoke b5, but black was going to play b5 either way. So still not sure about what the bishop to a4 idea was about. But okay, knight to f8. Levon continues with his plan with b4 now. Continuing the expansion on the queen side, and knight to g6. With bishop to e3, now challenging black's dark square bishop. Bishop captures, f captures, and now queen to d7. So putting a lot of pressure on white's king side. For example, if the queen moves somewhere, you can let's say capture here, and after g captures, capture the h3 pawn. So you have to be a little bit careful. With knight back to d2, and now knight c to e7. With knight to b3, this knight now wants to come over to c5, as it will be an excellent outpost. Queen to c6, putting pressure on the g2 pawn, and now queen to d2, just defending it. Levon goes knight to h4, now with a triple attack against the g2 pawn, and here with e4, just blocking the bishop's attack. Rook to e2 would be dangerous, because here black can just capture the pawn. You haven't really defended it, because after bishop captures and rook captures, you don't capture the rook, but rather knight f3 check. You just pick up the queen. So after knight h4 with e4, blocking the bishop's attack towards the g2 pawn, and now while you could capture and give up the bishop this way, Levon decided to do it in a much more interesting way. Queen to g6, saying, okay, if you capture here, I just capture on g3. Nepo says, no thank you. King to h2, you're welcome to have your light square bishop, as it's not doing all that much at the moment. So bishop back to c6, and now comes knight to c5, grabbing this very nice outpost. And although it is a very nice outpost, the knight doesn't really have all that many squares the knight can go to. But if black ever wants to push f5, and black does want to push f5, then you will have, for example, the e6 square. Maybe this bishop can come to b3, control e6, maybe the knight can go there. And also, it kind of prevents this rook from being activated, as knight captures on a6 is a threat where white would just get a passed pawn. Aronian says, okay, no problem. We have f5, e captures on f5, knight e captures on f5, and now not trading, queen captures on g3 is a threat, knight to e4. And now this is an excellent defensive setup with the two knights. This knight nicely controls the g3 square. If, for example, you capture, the other knight takes this knight's place, so it's just an excellent setup. With bishop to d5 now, not allowing bishop to b3, and here we have rook to e2, just putting more more defense to the g2 pawn. And while the rook is there, the queen can now again be activated. We have rook 8 to d8, offering the a6 pawn, but you have to activate the rook somehow. But Nepo just ignores it. He says, no problem, that pawn is not going anywhere. Rook 8 to f1. With knight to d6 now, preparing some trades on the e4 square, and here comes queen to e1. There was an interesting idea, d4, just opening up a discovery here against the queen, and then after some trades, knight captures, knight captures, bishop captures, and rook captures. Now you still have this tension going on, but rook captures knight is a threat here. And now after queen g5, defending the knight, offering a queen trade, now you play queen e2, where black cannot capture because you capture on e8, and white just has a very nice, white has an overwhelming position here. So this was one way to go about it. Nepo finds a different way. It also includes the same idea. The knight on h4 is undefended, which is something you should always look in your own games. If you see a piece in your opponent's camp that's undefended, try to use this as a motive for any future combinations. A game that comes to mind is Gorgonitsa versus Tal, where Tal used the undefended rook. I believe it was on e1 to create just a monstrosity of an attack. If you haven't seen that game, I will put a link to it in the description below. It's an old game, you know, of course it's an old game, but it's an old video. Back from when my videos were still at only 30 frames per second, but it's still a very nice game. So if you want to check it out, it will be the first link in the description below. But okay, queen to e1, going after the knight here, and now comes knight back to f5. And here, while you can capture on a6, Nepo still waits. First a5, you have almost created a passed pawn. You just have to capture on a6, and then you will have created a passed pawn. Rook to f8, preparing to double up rooks on the f-file, and now rook e to f2. Nepo doubles up on the f-file. We have rook to f7, preparing to double up on the f-file, and now rook to f3. With h5, preparing h4 to gain more control of the g3 square, and now comes knight captures on a6, finally grabbing that pawn. And now, well, whatever happens, happens, but Nepo does have a passed pawn on a5. With h4 by Levon, knight back to c5, and here comes rook d to f8, doubling up on the f-file. And here with king to g1, not wanting to keep the king there, so if all the pieces clear, maybe the g3 square shouldn't be so available. With queen to h6, and now comes queen to c1. If you start pushing right away, for example, with a6, then knight to e3 can be sort of problematic. You will have to capture on f7, but there are tricks involved. For example, if queen captures, you just capture, and after rook captures on f1 with check. King h2, now rook a1, you prevent the pawn from going any further, and also you are threatening rook f1, rook h1 mate, ideas like that. So with queen to c1, Nepo now offers a queen trade. He would very much enjoy a queen trade, as then he can start pushing his passed pawn to victory. But Levon tries knight e3, just the same. So you can't capture the knight, it's the same idea that we've shown. You have to play rook captures on f7, we have rook captures, king captures, and now queen back to e1. You could also play bishop to b3. seems like a nice idea where you can just trade off a lot of pieces, and after bishop captures and knight captures, then start pushing your pawn. Black doesn't really have any threats on the king side. But okay, queen back to e1 first, and only now knight captures on c2. We have queen to f2 check, king to e8, and now queen captures on c2. Bishop captures on e4, we have knight captures on e4, knight captures, d captures, and queen to e3 check. King to f1, and now we have queen to f4 check. King to d7 with the idea of bringing the king closer to helping out with stopping the pass pawn seems to have been a better move, but Levon goes for queen to f2 check, and already here Levon was very low on time. Queen to f2, blocking check, and now if you capture, then even though you are in time to stop the passed pawn, it doesn't really matter. You're down a pawn, and while black is pretty much black king is stuck guarding the passed a pawn, you're just gonna win all the pawns here. Well, you don't even have to win all of them. You can win as many as you'd like, and then just push your own passed pawns and win the game. On the other hand, if you decide to capture on e4, it's not going to help you. Just king g1, and next you're going to start pushing your pawn. Queen to c6, you have to prevent the pushing of the pawn, but then queen captures on h4. You can't defend everything. Queen captures on c3, you're going to get king to h2, and then after king to d7, a6. And while black is busy dealing with the a6 pawn, you're just going to gobble up all the other pawns. For example, queen c6, you're going to play queen g4 check, king d8, you're going to play a7, and after queen to a8, now you go after the pawns. Queen captures here, queen captures, now you're going to deliver check, king d7, queen captures on e5, and now you have a very nice control of the c5 square, and you can just start pushing, for example, the h pawn, and that's enough for a victory. So after queen to f2, you don't trade and you don't capture here. Queen to c1 check by Levon, queen to e1, and now queen back to f4 check. King to g1, now the queen also guards the e4 pawn while still pressuring the h4 pawn. King to d8, and now queen to f2. Again, offering a trade, asking do you maybe want to capture on e4 now. We have queen to c1 check, still avoiding it, and now king to h2. We have queen captures on c3, and now a6. King back to e8, and we have queen captures on h4. Queen to a3 going after the a6 pawn, but now queen h5 check. King to f8, and here you are more than welcome to pause the video and try to find the absolute best winning move for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent trader of queens and goer into winning positions. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, queen to f3 check. You force a queen trade, and then it's all over. Queen captures on f3 can be played, and after g captures on f3 is just all over. But it was at queen f3 check that Levon resigned the game, or he ran out of time. It's one of those. I know he had, I think, less than a second when the time was stopped, but this is resignable, so it's just the same, because after queen captures and pawn captures, just a7 and a8 wins the game. So a very nice game, and before I forget, let's check out the standings. And like I said, it's for a quiet game, that's a very loud one. There you have it, with 4.5 points, Fabiano Caruana, Ding Liren, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Vishwanathan Anand, and Sergei Karyakin, after winning against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, the game we've shown in the previous video. Then with 4 points, Magnus Carlsen, still without a loss, but also without a win, all draws. Same with Wesley So, all games drawn. And the same with Shahriar Mamedyarov, all 8 games drawn. Then we have 3.5 points, Anish Giri, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, and Hikaru Nakamura, and the only player with 2 losses, Levon Aronian, with 3 points. So there we have it. That's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank James Norwood for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. And as usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the Sinquefield Cup, continuing the Capablanca saga, and of course checking up on your suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.